In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am truly excited to speak with today's guest. He's a 3-time CEO and has also held a range of leadership positions at large organizations, including HP and Rackspace, and he's a regular Forbes contributor. Most recently, he was president, CEO, and board member of Ntirety, a company offering managed cybersecurity and IT solutions that he led through multiple acquisitions and other transformations. And hot off the press, he very recently exited Ntirety and is starting a new consulting practice called Profit Growth Insights. Please welcome Emile Sayegh to the show.
Natalie, thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's great to have you, and I'm really eager to delve into your insights, especially given your breadth of experience growing and evolving multiple ventures. So, to kick things off, I wanted to ask you, what is the biggest misconception out there about driving major change in a company?
Absolutely. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. The first one is that if you put a good plan and if it looks good on Excel and if it gains approval ahead of time, that it's going to go exactly like the plan that you devised. You have to really be flexible. You have to have parameters as you're executing. And then when it comes to driving change, it's all about the execution and also getting buy-in, which is part of it is communication as well. Communication to your stakeholders, both the folks that are approving the plan, as well as the folks that are enduring the change, that are making the change, that are subject to the change. And it's all about execution, communication, and getting buy-in from your stakeholders.
That sounds like really good advice. I wanted to see if we could go into each of those areas a bit more. Maybe starting with the buy-in. Can you talk about how you go about that?
Yes, of course. That's the key. Because just like on a boat, you want everybody rowing in the right direction, in the same direction. You don't want people that are inadvertently or on purpose because of insecurities rowing in the opposite direction that you want the boat to go to. So the way that you get buy-in is, first transparency and humility. There's a combination of both. You have to come in and tell the team exactly what the plan is, what it means to them, and also when appropriate, give them assurances of safety. They need to know that if they're going to be embarking with you in this journey, that there's going to be some element of comfort and trust that they're not going to be left out in the cold. So whenever you're embarking on a big change like that, a lot of people are thinking about, what does this mean to me specifically? And, for them to kind of be going with you along in that journey, they need to understand exactly what a win would look like for them, what a win would look like for the entire team, and that if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, that we're going to end up in a good place together.
Yeah. I had heard or been in another discussion where we talked about one of the worst things you can say is nothing will change, because inevitably, things will change. And so those assurances is really being cognizant of, what to say, how quickly, how much transparency. And so I'm wondering, is there a level that there's too much transparency or too much too soon? Or do you feel like it's kind of the more the better?
Well, there is sometimes, I think you want to be careful if you're brainstorming to share your brainstorming with a broader team. Now, with a very small subset where it's safe to brainstorm, I think that's perfectly acceptable. But you have to be careful not to be signaling every idea to the broader team or the public, if this is a public company, or even to the board. If you're still brainstorming, they don't want to go through the sausage making, if you will. They want to get whenever you're thinking reaches a point of maturity. I always talk about the 80%. If it's 80%, it doesn't have to be 100%, but if it's 80%, say, hey, look, this is the direction we're going. We're going to be flexible. These are the areas that we haven't decided on. I think that's perfectly acceptable. But I think there is a mistake that sometimes people get into where they're still sharing ideas that are preliminary, that are not cooked, that are half baked, and that can create a perception that the leadership team doesn't know exactly what they're doing when they're still thinking out loud. And but in general, I do think one of the things that is essential in driving change is to build trust. And one of the great books that I've always recommended is a book by Stephen Covey's son, actually, that's called The Speed of Trust. And um, in that, if you build trust with a team, and people actually trust that the destination is worthy of their efforts, if they feel safe with you on this journey, then I think there's going to be um, a, a less of a premium on perfect information that's going out to the team. People will understand. It's like, hey, look, we're still thinking, we're still deliberating about these thoughts, but these are the things that are fixed. These are the things that we know right now.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. I would completely agree with that. And another area I want to come back to, you talked about, the context of getting buy-in, the transparency and the humility. So I wanted to ask more about the humility. Like, what does that mean to you? And are there any examples that come to mind of kind of how that plays out?
Absolutely. Every single leader needs to um, explain to their teams that they make mistakes. We're human. I always say, if we're not making a mistake every day, we're not trying hard enough, frankly. And when one makes a mistake, I think it's important to set the example and quickly admit, and figure out how to fix it, and move on, right? Because that's an example that we set for our team so that they can do the same thing. What the worst thing that can happen is that your team is afraid and they're covering up for their mistakes. That is a terrible environment to be in. So as a leader, I have to show that I'm vulnerable, that I'm human, just like everybody else, and I make mistakes, and I have to admit these mistakes, and then quickly figure out how to figure out and improve on that, and not make the same mistake again. I think that's definitely part of it. The other thing is that um, um, I always say that when we go into a meeting, we need to leave the meeting with the right answers, not necessarily coming into the meeting with the right answers. We will always have hypotheses coming into the meeting, and great ideas of how to solve a problem. But if the meeting is just to come in and give orders, that's just not the way that modern business functions, right? Nobody wants to work in that environment. It's a meeting, depending on the type of meeting, of course. But if it's a strategy meeting, it's very important for each one of us to come in with a hypothesis on how to get to the end objective. But the more important thing is that we leave the meeting with the right answers, by taking everybody's input. So, as a leader, we have to make sure that people understand that we listen, that we value people's opinions, that we're willing to listen, take it into account, and create an environment, foster an environment for that.
Yep, yep. That's great. And what about the other area that you mentioned around flexibility? Is there um, you know, too much flexibility and kind of keeping you from reaching your goals? Like, how do you think about that?
Um, For sure. Look, there has to be an objective. We can't, there has to be an objective, but there has to be a margin of maneuverability within those objectives. And I have a couple of rules there that I would like to share. The analogy again is a boat, is a vessel in the water. There's a lot of flexibility whenever somebody's, doing repairs to the boat. above the water line, right? Because, they can't sink the boat. It's above the water line. The boat won't take water. But whenever you're working below the water line, you have to be very careful. You don't want to be using your drill and start drilling to hang a picture below the water line and then have the boat take water, take water and then sink everybody that's on the boat. So decisions that are below the water line need to be very well vetted, probably have much less flexibility than decisions that are above the water line. And then, those are decisions where as functional leaders, we can make without sinking the whole ship, without sinking the whole boat. But below the waterline, this is where we have to consult with other functions. We have to consult with the captain, and then make decisions, in conjunction with everybody's eyes wide open, saying, look, this is something that we have to absolutely do. It will have effect on other functions, and I just want to make sure that everybody's bought in and everybody's signed off. So, there are many decisions that we make that could sink the enterprise. You can make a decision on something as simple as changing sales commissions that would sink the enterprise, because all of a sudden you're selling products that are not as profitable, or you've essentially stunted the sales growth. And I'm talking about something mundane that people don't think as something that can sink the corporation. You can also make decisions in your marketing campaigns by changing a few words here and a few words there, thinking that, this is not going to cause any harm. And all of a sudden you're getting the wrong leads into the sales organization. And you're tying up the sales organization into a cycle where they're having to respond to leads that either are not profitable or not core to the business, and so on and so forth. And this is how, depending on how fast you react and adjust, you can miss a couple of months worth of sales very quickly if you're not careful.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. I think that's creates a really nice visual for it, and a good way to talk to the team about it. I don't know if that's something you've used explicitly or not, but I could see bringing that forth. Like, is it? I always talk about tip of the iceberg. Is this something kind of on the tip, or is this kind of below the level? So I think that's a great framework.
Yeah. No, I use it with a team. I enjoy analogies. Sometimes, analogies have limitations, of course, but I enjoy them because people, it kind of brings it home. And then if you use a couple of examples, then it's like, oh, I get it. Or, all right, and then, all of a sudden clicks.
Yeah, for sure. So next, Emile, I'd love to, get into some real world examples with you, and wanted to ask, what would you say is kind of the biggest change that you've driven in an organization?
I've driven a lot of changes, but probably the biggest change was the merger of two sizable companies, Hostway and Hosting. Both companies had been around for about 20 years, have a long, rich legacy. And merging them was a pretty sizable challenge, actually. So we signed off on the merger and got the financing in December of 2018. And then we announced it publicly in early January of 2019. And then the analysis that we had done to justify the merger initially said, well, look, the integration is going to take a year and a half, and is going to be a certain amount of dollars that is realized in the synergies, as well as kind of like how long it's going to take to integrate. So we went on I was determined to break those timelines and actually accelerate them, because I didn't want to be in MLAs where the two companies were not integrated for a long time. I didn't want to be operating under two different brands, or even, kind of like a hyphen brand or a merged brand. We were operating under Hostway/Hosting for about 9 months. And my commitment to the team, to the board, to the investors, to the employees, that we were not going to come under a single new brand until we finished the integration. So there was kind of like and people were craving to be under a unified brand, not Hostway Hosting. So there was an emotional appeal to it, to the goal, as well as certainly there was a financial appeal, because I didn't want to be operating until two Salesforce instances as an example. I didn't want to be operating under two billing systems. I didn't want to be operating under two control panels. I didn't want to have two separate operations teams, and I didn't want to have two different finance teams, so on and so forth. So we went on a breakneck schedule, and honestly, we were able to accomplish the integration of the two companies in 9 months, which was a record. And at that point, we had undergone a short branding study to kind of figure out what the new name of the merged entity would be. And we decided on Ntirety and launch Ntirety. But, certainly before that, we had, gotten buy-in from the team and, socialized it. And I was living on an airplane going from office to office and, essentially selling the vision, selling the new brand and what it means to be this new company, because we wanted to be a departure from the legacy hosting legacy, not hosting the company, but the industry, to becoming more of a managed services provider that is focused on cybersecurity, that is focused on compliance, and really that is focused on data services as well, and more futuristic outlook.
Yeah. Yeah. And what would you say were the hardest parts through this process, especially given the acceleration of it?
The hardest parts, I would say, was the fact that we had a distributed team, we had distributed infrastructure. When we merged, we had about 16 data centers all across the world. I needed to take it down. The goal was to take it down to about 4 to 6, and I'm pleased to report that we were able to do that. But the hardest was the distribution of the team, and not being able to reach everybody at the same time, or kind of pull everybody into a conference room. Even though we have the technology to do that, it's just not the same thing. So I was essentially living on an airplane, as well as my executive team was living on an airplane, going from site to site to make sure that everybody's on board. I would say the hardest part, and I'm going to be very candid and truthful, is that, look, whenever you do a merger, not everybody stays on the boat. Not everybody stays on the bus. You have two heads of marketing, two heads of sales, two CFOs. There was two CEOs. I was fortunate to have been selected as the CEO of the merged company. But my point is that you have two of everything, and you have to figure out how to trim it down to one. And we were very careful not to go overweight on one company or the other, and make sure that we got the best out of both companies for the positions that we needed to. That doesn't mean that the people that were not selected were bad or anything like that. Not at all. A lot of them are still very, very good friends and still very good colleagues and amazing at what they do. However, sometimes in the merged company, that's not the best fit for a variety of reasons. It could be location. It could be that we decided to locate all the go-to-market teams in one location, as an example, in Austin, right? And then the VP of marketing happened to be up in Denver. Well, their entire team was going to be in Austin, as an example. This is just a small example. So not everything was related to their competence or their fit or their skills and talents. Sometimes it was just them being in the wrong location, and then us needing to have people closer to their teams.
Yep, yep. It's interesting that, right, people do tend to take it personally of, right, I wasn't, the best, or the company needed something that I couldn't bring to the table, but that sometimes it is as simple as, where you're located, or, a skill set that maybe wasn't necessary to date, but might be needed kind of for the future direction of the company. So I can certainly appreciate that. And we have a client going through that right now that has just merged with another company, and they're in the midst of the integration of looking at kind of the combined team and kind of what does that mean, and the new value proposition, and all of that.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It's tough, but I mean, you have to, in those cases, you have to work with extreme empathy. transparency, and then treat people the best way possible on their way out. There's no excuse. This is not their fault. And you just have to treat them in the best way possible on the way out, whether it's severance, whether it's references, whether it's help finding a new position, on and on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing you had mentioned earlier was communications. And so I'm interested in hearing about the external communications and how you navigated that. And I know that's an area that there's always a lot of finesse around, especially, the customer communications. I don't know if you had any partners, but how did you approach that? And what kind of advice do you have?
Yeah, I mean, certainly whenever there's change like that, everybody gets jittery. Your partners become jittery. It's like, oh, what does that mean? Are you changing your strategy? Your customers want to know what that means. So, absolutely, this partly of why I was on the road so much was going and visiting all our major partners and major customers. Took them through the roadmap. They got to know me. They got to know the new executive team. We transparently told them exactly what the steps are going to look like. We showed them our timeline for integration and said, hey, look, there's going to be 9 months where you're going to have to be operating through 2 control panels where, potentially there could be some mistakes in your billing if you're ordering, a little bit from the 2 companies. But this is the roadmap. This is where we're going to get to, and we're committed to accelerating that as much as possible so that you have a seamless experience. And I would say, by and large, that went exactly as planned. There was very little complaints during the merger about customers kind of feeling that they were operating with 2 companies. We were very diligent to make sure that work always kind of was on our side, that the customer was not subjected to the fact that we're merging and so on and so forth. Yes, they did have to migrate. Some of the customers had to migrate to a new control panel and set up new billing information and so on and so forth. But I would say that was just minor, and we've never received any complaints that I recall, any substantial complaints that I can recall throughout that period.
That's great. That's great. And, so now that this is, 5+ years in the rear view, is there anything that you would have done differently in hindsight or that you kind of took as an experience to do differently the next time around?
One of the things that I would say, I'm going to give some generic advice here, is potentially whenever you're going into these, the things that are within your control, um, it's okay to be very comfortable and very confident that you're going to execute on the things that are within your control. However, as you can imagine, back in 2018, the debt environment, as an example, was very different than the debt environment is today. And this is totally outside of the control of anybody in the company, outside of the management team, or even the board. But the debt environment back then was that of free money and 0% interest and so on and so forth. So it was easy to overborrow and overlever companies, right? And frankly, not have to worry about that too much. And then certainly when we were setting the horizon for a potential exit for the company, as normal with PE firms, it was 2 years, 2.5 years out. So none of us also predicted a crisis like COVID, a major crisis like COVID that essentially froze the M&A markets and froze a lot of industries. We had big exposure to the hospitality industry as an example. None of us were able to predict that. So whenever you start to kind of look at these, maybe black swan effects or kind of once in a lifetime events, you stack 2 of them: the interest rate increase, and then COVID. One, as I'm doing this again, I would say one has to be careful. One has to make sure that everybody's going in with eyes wide open and run some scenarios and be comfortable with the worst case scenario. So even run some scenarios like that, and then say, okay, well, even if it was the worst case where, we got a crisis like COVID, I know nobody could have predicted it, um, but there's ways that you can model that, right? And then interest rates increase, then is everybody comfortable with the worst case scenario as an outcome? So I would say, going back, hindsight is always 2020. Um, but these are the things that I would caution people going into ventures right now, and raising money, whether it's debt or equity, is just make sure that your modeling has some worst case scenarios in there, and make sure that you, your board, your management team, your investors all are comfortable with the worst case scenarios.
Yeah, that's good advice. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about a speech I heard many years ago. I think it was 2015, 2016, and it was the analyst firm ITR Economics talking about black swan events and how to prepare. And in that same, it was kind of an executive day. In that same day, we were doing our 5-year plans. And what do you know? Mine was for 2020. And then we all know, obviously, what happened there. So it was to some degree luck of the draw, which businesses kind of thrived or were challenged by different things during the pandemic. But it was also a bit exactly as you say, look at the scenarios. You don't know exactly what is going to come your way, but how do you kind of plan for kind of best case, worst case of different kind of levers that take place in a business?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's very easy. We're optimistic people, as executives, as founders, as CEOs, as C-levels. We're optimistic people. This is what makes us who we are. Most of us are extroverts. A lot of us, I guess, are extroverts. Positive in our outlook, and so on and so forth. And we really have to stop, think, and be prudent, and really, really look at the downside, and make sure that everybody's looking at each other with eyes wide open, and be comfortable with the absolute worst scenario that can happen.
Yeah. I'm curious too, Emile, like taking a step back and thinking about, any of the different transformations that you've helped lead, whether it is kind of M&A or evolving the service offering, a go-to-market shift. How do you think about the different roles and departments in an organization, and kind of how do they all kind of come together in the right way in a transformation?
Natalie, you're gonna like where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna start with marketing, because if the message is wrong, everything is wrong. Like, and nothing will work. Marketing is the rudder of the ship. It's not the biggest department. It's not the strongest, maybe most powerful, so on and so forth. But it definitely, because it controls the message, it controls the direction, because it controls the message, it controls what leads, and what interest flows into the company. It is absolutely critical, and it starts right there, in my humble opinion. And this is where, as a CEO, I was always very close to the marketing team, and really helped shape the message and the marketing strategy, if you will, to make sure that the intake of the company and the direction of the company, the way that we're setting it to the world, um, is consistent with the core offering and the core value proposition of the company. So I would say, it starts with marketing. And then after that, you have multiple departments that essentially are, kind of help with that. The sales team, the sales team is critical, to essentially, hunt for the right deals, to essentially help close the right deals, position the right products, and so on and so forth. And they're essential to be aligned with the message, of the company, that marketing is essentially shouting from the rooftops. Product, as a product guy, I would say, um, critical, in figuring out exactly what the customers want, um, figuring out how to serve, um, those customer needs, in the best way possible, in a way that differentiates the company. Um, one of the things that people confuse product with sometimes is confusing product with engineering. It's not about the features. It's not about the bells and whistles. It's not about the speeds and feeds. It's all about the value that we bring to the customer. It's all about the benefits. I always talk about the features and the benefits, right? And, I can tell you that uh, this, this product has all these speeds and feeds and all these bells and whistles, but I haven't told you yet what the benefits are to you as a customer. And that's where we need to be focused. And products essential mission is to design products that design products as well as pass on to marketing a correct value proposition for these products, where you don't also only have the features, but also the benefits that we bring, the unique benefits that we bring to the market. Operations, it's all about execution. If you don't have a good operations team, frankly, everything else doesn't matter, because you're not delivering on your value proposition. If you're having outages, if your customer support is not delivering a exceptional experience, a wow experience, then frankly, everything else doesn't matter. Now, just having an amazing operation doesn't mean that you're going to have an amazing company. You can have a very, very well-run operation that is gold-plated, but that is not profitable, right? That's not able to scale. That's not flexible. So operations has to be run in a way that balances the rest of the functions. It has to deliver on the value proposition as is. It can't be overbuilt, but also it can't be underbuilt. It has to be just right. And it has to preserve and deliver on the mission of the company. I'll move on perhaps to HR, a critical function in preserving and nurturing the culture of the company, because without a culture, the company has no soul. We're just all peons, and we're all cogs in the wheel. HR plays an amazing function in recruiting the right talent, in ensuring the right talent gets promoted, and putting the right safeguards to make sure that employees are being treated fairly, and people are being presented with the right opportunity in a fair and unbiased manner. I think HR plays a huge role, and there's a kind of a sacred alliance, I would say, at least for me, between the person that's running the revenue functions, which we call in modern terms, maybe CRO, which has sales and marketing, with a person that's running the operations and product, whether those are two separate people or not, depends on your org philosophy and whatnot. In some cases, I had a chief product officer and a COO. In some cases, I kind of merged these two functions as well. And last is not last, the chief people officer, the head of HR, and then the CFO. The CFO plays a critical role, making sure that we don't run out of money, that we are being judicious in our spend, and that also we are being judicious in our forecast. So the CFO plays a role both on the revenue side and the cost side. It's not just one, as well as is really the face to the board when it comes to the financial performance of the company, to the board and the investors, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful overview and some great perspectives there. I think it really does underscore the need to bring in and bring together all the functions, and the right one at the right time, and the interplay between them. As you said, kind of too much or too little of something can have just as bad of an impact. And I do love that you started with marketing. I think, not every company does that. And sometimes I see it starts with the vision, the product, sales, and then marketing at the end. And so I was trying to think, as you were talking, why is that? And I'd be very interested in your perspective. I think one of the things that comes to mind for me is that some some folks think about marketing as the execution, right? Like the lead generation, the sales support, the putting together materials for events. So all of the, I guess, the stuff above the iceberg, so to speak, to bring back that analogy. But not all of the things like you brought up messaging or the market analysis or who is your kind of new competitive landscape with maybe existing competitors and kind of that broader perspective. So it's great that you do have that appreciation and perspective. And I'm wondering if you have a take on why not kind of all executives think like that.
I mean, exactly, because a lot of executives, I think, have all of that in their heads, and they just want somebody to execute on the vision, right? So there's that humility as well, and kind of going to go back to the beginning of the podcast, kind of going into the meeting with a set idea of what it should be. There's definitely a time and place for that, but it can't be all the time. So in my humble opinion, working hand in hand with marketing, you kind of figure out what the best message that's going to resonate, um, makes it actually better appealing to prospects. It's better appealing to existing customers. It's better appealing to investors, even whenever you're going in and trying to figure out a problem that needs to be solved and messaging against that versus coming in with already predisposed notion of what it is. Yeah, there's definitely, in some cases, a place and time for that. I do think, though, the majority of the time, we have to work on solving the existing customer problem, and kind of going hand in hand and working together with marketing on that, would be my preferred path here versus just going in and telling marketing this is what you should do, and you're responsible for Google keywords and kind of the running the website and t-shirts and brochures and stuff like that. I mean, of course, that all comes with the territory, but frankly, um, that's not how you get the most value out of your marketing team. Make him
Yeah.
part of the mission. Make him a core part of the mission.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love your more holistic approach, and of course, agree with that. So, thanks for sharing it. But I'd love to, switch gears a bit, and we've heard some great kind of insights and perspectives from you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of your background. Who is Emile? How did you go from kind of your upbringing to where you are today? Did you know you wanted to be CEO someday? Tell me a bit about yourself.
I did not know I was going to be CEO one day. And I give the credit to one of my teachers in high school who was actually also a nun. And she told me specifically, she said, you're going to be, a leader. I don't know exactly what you're going to be, but you're going to be a leader. And I just didn't quite understand why she was saying that. But I guess one of the things is that every time that there was a group, people kind of shy away from making decisions and or taking input, or actually taking a leadership role and kind of leading the others. And I never really shied away. I don't know why, but I never really shied away from it. And then she kind of saw that. And then I actually grew up overseas. I grew up in the country of Lebanon, and frankly, through a very dark period of the country, during the civil war that was going on there. And then I came to the U.S. to complete my undergraduate studies, and I finished in engineering from the University of Texas in Austin, and immediately started working in Austin, actually, and had a fantastic career early on. Had the opportunity to work on some very, very cool technology, and had the privilege of actually registering 9 patents, working for a company called W.L. Gore and Associates, the company that makes Gore-Tex. But I worked in the electronic products division, and initially worked as an engineer, but very quickly, um, you know, again, rose to leadership positions, not because I sought them, but just because by default, nobody wanted to make a decision. And W. L. Gore had a very unique culture in that it really encouraged and allowed, people to kind of rise from the ranks to be leaders. And I found myself every time, being in a kind of a leadership position, whether looking at new markets, whether it's operational improvements, so on and so forth. So I decided to go back and complete my graduate degree while I was working. Um, when I graduated from the Macomb School of Business, and then and I felt um, with with my graduate, with my master's degree from Macomb, from the University of Texas, I felt that I had just formalized all the things that I knew intuitively about leadership, about leading, about driving change. It's just all these things that I kind of knew, and I did by osmosis, by reading books, by watching others, by getting mentored, so on and so forth. All of a sudden I go through this program, and it was very intensive. It was designed for executives. And we would meet for one whole week every quarter, and then every other weekend, the entire weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, would be all day classes. So um, I had formalized what I had known just by intuition or by watching others, and that honestly gave me the confidence. It's like, okay, I know how to do this. There's a process, and I'm going to build on this learning that I learned in school to kind of figure things out. And then that's essentially how things kind of started rolling. And every time I'd go, there would be another leadership opportunity or somebody tapping me on the shoulder to go look at a new market, lead a new team, and then I've had the privilege to go work at a startup during the last .com bust in 2000, 2001, and learned 2002 and learned tons there. And then I levered that into my career at Rackspace, and before that at Dell. At Rackspace, I was tapped to go lead the cloud business there. Started from scratch. Go do acquisitions, and merge it with products that we had designed as well, because I was the head of products. I was the VP of products when we went public the first time at Rackspace. And then, we levered technology that we built inside with technology that we acquired, and built this thing that's called the Rackspace Cloud, which, was at the time the only competitor to AWS at the time. And that was kind of the beginnings of OpenStack, if you will, that was launched in 2010, which became the open source cloud platform that a lot of companies based their clouds on. So anyway, and after that, I I got tapped to be the CEO of Cadero. That was a turnaround and private equity had tapped me on the shoulder saying, hey, look, this is a turnaround, you want to come in and do that. And then absolutely went in 2012, January 2012, and we turned around the company, got it back into growth, into profitability. And everybody had a great exit in 2015. And I stayed on till 2016 with the new investors until another private equity firm came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, this is other company called Hostway that needs a similar turnaround to what you did at Cadero. Would you be willing to come in and do that? And I jumped on that opportunity, helped turn around Hostway, then merged it with hosting.com, and then formed Ntirety as a result. So it seems like um, it was a succession of solving a problem that existed, solving it in an efficient manner, and then your reputation spreads, and then somebody comes in and taps you on the shoulder to kind of do the same thing or something similar or something adjacent.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's such a interesting set of experiences that got you to where you are today, and kind of pointing back to the comment you mentioned from your teacher, not being afraid to make decisions, especially when others around you might be. I think turnarounds and M&A and all of that. It's just so critical to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And on the same lines, curious, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your younger self in your first ever leadership role?
Yeah. I mean, I would say what I've been saying all along, which is, um, don't assume that you're walking in with the right answers. Just be very comfortable walking out of the meeting with the right answer versus going in with the right answers. A lot of us um, that are young, when we were young, I should say, and early in our careers, um, we all of us had this a lot of us had this issue of being know-it-alls, right? And, we thought we knew it all. We thought just because we read it in a book, this is how it should be. Um, or because we've seen it once, this is how it should be. I think we have to be very cognizant of the fact that even as young folks coming into the jobs, into new jobs, into new careers, we have to make sure that we're listening to everybody. We're tapping the opinions of the people that have been there and done that, as well as people with fresh perspectives um, across um, across functions as well. Sales is going to have a different perspective than marketing. Product is going to have a different perspective than finance. Operation is going to have a very different perspective than accounting, right? But all those perspectives are important when you're making decisions that are below the waterline, and also you need to understand them. And as when I was younger, I would go into a meeting thinking that I knew it all, and that my perspective was potentially more important than other perspective, right? Just because when you're younger, um, I think early in your career, you're still self-absorbed. You're still, life hasn't taught you the lessons that has taught us, right? Of
Right,
being
right.
humble, that humility really pays off at the end because you're getting the best thinking out of everybody. When you're humble, the barrier to sharing ideas to improvement is a lot lower for everybody on the team.
Yeah, yeah, very well said. And life certainly has a way of humbling us, especially when we're launching and changing businesses and learning a ton through that process. So thank you for that. And as we near the end of today's discussion, I wanted to see if you could please, share with listeners like what's the best way to connect with you.
Absolutely. You can reach me on emil.sayegh@gmail.com. You can reach me on my LinkedIn profile, Emile Sayegh, Sayegh. And I would love to hear from you, hear any ideas, any input, or any feedback on the ideas that we just shared today.
That's great. That's great. And keep us posted as your new company website launches, and we can share that with our listeners as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I'll maybe just kind of put a little bit plug for it, but, I've been since I left Entirety, about 10 days ago, been inundated with calls and requests to, sit on boards and, come in and, look at companies and so on and so forth. I've been wanting to do a sabbatical, help my kids go back to school. So a lot of these things are going to have to wait, but, I did, kind of start formulating an idea around a consultancy to essentially help companies get back into profit and growth because this is what I've been doing. So the name of the company is Profit Growth Insights, one word, and it's www.profitgrowthinsights.com. So yeah.
Great, great. Well, I'm very excited to follow and see what you do next, and I know you'll bring a lot of value to those companies. So thank you for sharing all of those insights and information with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Natalie, to you and to your listeners. It's been a joy and a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody listening. I know I loved hearing about so much of what Emile has shared and all of his experience around driving transformation and the different roles in the organization, and all of the insights around the merger and M&A experience. And so if today gave you any valuable insights, and I'm sure that it did, please share this with someone. Spreading this kind of knowledge and information helps us all grow as leaders and really equips us to drive successful transformation in our organizations. So thanks again, Emile. And this has been another fantastic episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time.
Thank you so much. Take care.
That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.